Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to be transplanting an Encore Azalea from one spot to another. I'm going to go through some of the reasons that you might move plants around your garden, why it's okay, because sometimes, folks are a little nervous about moving things around, and it is, in fact, okay to do it. And I consider sometimes these plants in the garden space here almost like chess pieces. Sometimes they need to be moved around for whatever reason, and it's okay to do it. I'll show you the process for doing it and talk about the timing as well. When I'm going to move a shrub like this, this is an autumn lily, Encore Azalea. A lot of times, if it's been in the ground for a long time, I'll actually root prune it, meaning I'll go around the drip line of the plant. The drip line is just the outer edge of where the plant is actually sitting. And I'll take my shovel, and I just use this trenching shovel. It's a narrow shovel. It's pretty easy to work with. It's a little lighter than a regular shovel. It's a little easier to stick down in the ground, and just a little overall easier to work with in the garden, especially with a clay soil like I have here in my area. But a lot of times I'll go around several weeks before I move something and just cut a trench around it. So basically, an azalea has a very shallow root system. Typically, the roots are up in the top 3-4 inches of soil. So if I go around this thing and cut it, 3 or 4 inches deep all the way around, I'm basically containing the roots into a smaller area, but I'm not pulling it out of the ground at that time, and allowing some roots to start to regenerate within the middle of that almost like container that I've created around the base of it, and kind of get over the fact that I've cut whatever roots were running out further than the drip line from around the plant. So that is a great strategy for preparing a plant to move, whether it's an azalea or any evergreen plant or non-evergreen plant. Just root prune it and then give it 5 or 6 weeks before you actually transplant it. This autumn lily Encore Azalea has actually only been in the ground for about 2.5 years, and I don't think it really needs to be root pruned like that. It's rooted out into the surrounding soil, but it's not so anchored in that it's going to be really, really difficult to move. So I'm not going to do the step of root pruning it. There's just not a lot of roots out here yet. The reason this thing is being moved, initially, Encore Azaleas need a little bit more sun than traditional azaleas. And I think a lot of them I see a lot of them that are planted in a little bit too much shade. Because again, you buy azaleas, you think azaleas are shade plants, and then, you bring them home, and you put them in the shade, and then they end up a little bit thin. They don't bloom quite as heavily as they would otherwise, and you just kind of realize they need to be out in more sunny location. This one was planted in plenty of sun, and then there's so many plants planted in this garden that another thing can happen is that it just gets crowded a bit. And so this one has just become crowded. There's a plant growing over the top of it. It's still looking great, and so I'm getting it in time where I'm not waiting for it to decline before I'm moving it. You may find that you've put it in an area that's too wet or too dry, again, too sunny, too shady, too whatever plant that you're moving. There's lots of reasons that you can end up moving, or from a simple design feature. You put it there and then you've looked at it for 2 years and it just doesn't really fit with the other things that are around it. But in this case, I'm just rescuing a plant that needs some more sun that it's currently in. A couple of considerations before I start to pop this azalea out of the ground. Number one would be, I know where this is going. Okay, so when you pop one out of the ground, know that you either have some place that you can kind of go store it temporarily, maybe in a vegetable garden that's got some worked up soil, or you have a container that's big enough to put it in, or you already know the space in your ornamental landscape where it's going to, and that I happen to know exactly where it's going to, so it's not going to spend a lot of time out of the ground. So that's important. Don't just pop it out of the ground and leave it on the driveway for 3 or 4 days. That will probably not go well. The other thing is water. I watered this plant a couple days ago. We want to make sure that it's in the best possible health as we're moving it. Sometimes you're moving something because it's in decline in some way, because again, it got too much shade or it's been too dry or something's gone on with it. You can't help that. But if you can help it, make sure that the plant's well watered and it's in the best possible condition that you can get it into on that day to move it. We're really dry right now. It's right here at the beginning of December, and normally we have lots of moisture in the soil, but I can dig down 3 or 4 inches right now. It's just absolutely bone dry. So this plant was watered well, and the space that it's going to is about to be watered well before I put it in that hole. With an azalea, I have enough experience with these things to know that they come out as basically little pancakes of roots. They're not gonna have, you know, a very deep tap root or anything like that that we have to worry about. So what I wanna do is, again, get that top 3 or 4 inches of roots broken all the way around it. You can see I'll break those roots and then I'll pull back on the shovel just a bit. Definitely don't want to break my shovel today, but as I'm breaking those roots, I am also kind of loosening the plant up just a bit. And I'm in an awkward place to dig here, but that's how it is a lot of times. Okay, so I'm just giving that just a little bit. Just a little bit. You see that, how fast? Azaleas typical. We just dug some out on the front foundation that had been in the ground probably since this house was built in the late 40s, and they came out pretty easy. Azaleas are, generally speaking, amongst the easier transplantable plants, again, just because it's got that, it's just basically a flat pie of roots. Okay. Okay. All right. Look at that. Look how nice that came out of the ground. This is the space that the azalea is going to land this morning. Let's talk about timing. Timing is extremely important. If we're talking about the best time to move an azalea like this, it would really be spring or fall, while the nighttime, daytime temperatures are kind of cool, but the ground temperature is still warm enough for it to actually do a little bit of rooting out into the soil. So giving it a little bit of time. Here I am December 1st. I probably, best time to move it would have been a month or 2 ago. And it would have been cool enough, again, outside of the summer temperatures, but it would have rooted into the soil. Or I wait till spring to do it. If you're dealing with marginal plants, some of these Encore Azaleas are for zone 6, and if you were in zone 6A and you were moving one of these Encore Azaleas, I'd probably wait till spring. I would do it at a time of year when it's starting to warm up. Again, it's not always, you're not always able to do things at the perfect time. So sometimes you may have to do it in the dead of winter or in the summertime. Just try to do it in the late evening. If you're doing it in the summertime, try to do it on, pick a cloudy day, possibly a rainy day. If you're doing it in the winter time, obviously not on a day that it's 13 degrees in the morning or something like that. You can see I'm in shorts despite it being December. It's a 60-degree day, it's cloudy, kind of the perfect conditions to get it moved. This has been a very well mulched space for a long time. Soil is wildly improved from the heavy clay soil that we started with out here. There were wood chips added, there was compost added. Again, it's very, very improved. I don't let a lot of chunky stuff fall in the holes when I'm digging holes, for plants. And so I want to get up, these whole leaves and any kind of chunky wood material and just kind of get it out of the way. Most of this mulch is broken down quite a bit and it can be mixed into the hole without any problem. I mentioned if you're in zone 6, I'd probably spring transplant an Encore Azalea. If I was down on the Gulf in zone 9 or 8B, 9, 10, I wouldn't want to be summer transplanting anything, and any time during the winter would be the perfect time to do it. Your soil stays warm enough that it will continue it'll continue to root in the ground through the winter. So you can see this soil is just wild. If you followed this project at all for any length of time, we can get down here far enough to find some compact soil. I've got some roots running through here from some perennials that are pretty aggressive. If I get down here far enough, you can see when I talk about the clay here, digging definitely changes too, but there's clay at the bottom of it, but even it now breaks apart more easily. We've got so much soil life out here now that all of this is amazing change, but look how dry it is. This is December. It definitely should not be this dry. So I'm going to dig about the same size as that root ball that came out of the ground. I don't want to dig any bigger than that, really. I don't want it sinking down in the ground later. So let me get the soil out of the hole and then I'll water it. So this is really a very small transplant job, really. I knew it would come out easy because it'd only been in the ground for about 2.5 years, and azaleas typically don't fight back a whole lot. So you know, don't be scared to move one. Put a tarp right here beside it. Typically when I dig something out, I will drag it up onto a tarp. This plant's light enough that I could actually just carry it. But what I'm trying to do is lessen as much as possible, keep as much of the soil on these roots as I can. If I go here and I bounce it all over the place, set it down here, set it down there, you know, go through 8 steps to get it over to the hole where it's going, I'm going to knock more and more of that soil off, do more and more damage to it as we go. So typically I'll put it on some sort of tarp, and then if it's a good smooth flat area like a lawn that I'll just drag the tarp across the lawn. Some plants get, you know, some plants are quite large doing this. If you have a long way to go and you have a low cart, this is an option as well. Just put it right there maybe. And we can't put it on top. I gotta put it, okay, that won't work. All right, so we can lift this tarp up like this and set it into the cart, which may not be on the camera right then, but go ahead and bring the cart up. So this is just a little low cart. You see it, hopefully you can see it right down there, and you just use the tarp to assist in picking it up. And then it can be slid to where it's going. And then you can stand the cart up real quick like that and just slide the tarp right off, right next to the hole where it's going. In this particular case, I'm transplanting something exactly 14 feet from where it was, so we don't have far to go. So I just drag it over here. I could have carried it, but I'll get it to the hole, and then, you know, you can kind of re-examine at this point, you know, did I get the hole approximately the same, you know, where I need it? Have I gone too deep? I really don't want to dig a hole really super deep for an azalea. I'd like to get it, you know, about where it was before, because almost all the rooting is going to go out into that, you know, upper 3-4 inches of space. So this is pretty good. It's wider, but it's not deeper than I need it. So I'll just slide it off of this tarp directly in the hole, and then just kind of re-gauge again that I've got the right depth. The depth is the most important part. And I can take a shovel and measure this, actually. This is pretty easy to figure out. I can lay the shovel across the solid ground behind it. And then I'd really like to have this root ball right at the top of the shovel. So the shovel gives me about an inch, a little more than an inch of raising it up above the grade. And so I'm a little low. I'll take, and if the plant's too heavy, the way to approach this, raising it, is to put some soil back in around it, and then you can kind of go back and forth and get that soil up under the plant. If it's light like this one is, I can just pop it out of the hole, fill some soil back in, and then put it right back into place. Make sure you tamp soil down that goes underneath the plant, because it will continue to settle later if you don't. I will get large debris out of the bottom of the hole. All right, now when we put our shovel along the back, it's now even with that, and that's pretty perfect, okay? And then the next stage would be, what is the front, right? So we want to make sure we're presenting, you know, a nice side of the plant. One thing, I say that, but then also, if it had a thin part on it, I might put the thin part toward the sun if I didn't mind it looking like that temporarily. So if I took the back part of this plant, what's been the back part, and I turned it toward the sun like that, it would not be the most attractive initial planting, but it would fill that side in. You know, the sun would take over and do some work for us here and get it filled in later. I'm not using any additional organic material. We've been adding organic material to the top of the soil for so long that any digging I do now incorporates organic material down there. It just doesn't need any more. And azaleas really don't mind the clay-based soils we have as long as they're mounded up a bit and they're not sitting down in the wet. That clay we have has iron in it, and these are, azaleas love low pH or acid soils. And we have the perfect pH, and we have the perfect amount of iron in here to keep this really dark, rich green color that they have. I frequently will talk about pruning a plant to kind of offset the root damage that I'm doing to it. So let's say I just cut off 30% of the roots or more in the process of transplanting this. If I was transplanting it during the summertime, and sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you have to do it on not the optimum time to be doing something for whatever reason, I probably would prune this off. Or if it was just after it spring flowered and it was the time of year to be pruning it, maybe I would do a little bit of pruning on it at that time as well. And that would kind of put it back in balance. But it's cool enough right now. Conditions will be favorable because I'm gonna have to, I'll water it. That I just don't feel the need, and it's got its flower buds on it for the next spring. So it fall bloomed, didn't bloom as much as it would have because that loropetalum over there was shading it out, but it does have the flower buds on it for spring. So I'm going to get quite a pretty good show out of this. At that point, after it spring blooms, I'm going to give it a bit of a haircut to get some of this lower area to start to fill back in where it's gotten a little bit thin. I will not fertilize it right now. No reason to fertilize it. I use organic fertilizers. Organic fertilizers really only work well when the soil's warm, and the soil's definitely cooled off. At this point, I'll wait until February, March, April when I do my normal organic fertilizing that I do every year and fertilize it at that time. That's all it really needs. So all I got to do now is just backfill this thing without covering up the top of it. You can actually see, if you get under here, the roots from the original planting. Where I left it up originally. Okay, I don't want to cover up any of that at all. I just want to get soil tucked in around this thing and firmed in. You can use the bottom or the back of your shovel like this, or any kind of thing that you can get kind of under it a little bit and tamp that soil down. I'll tamp on it a bit with my feet, but not super hard. But again, I can tuck all this soil under just like that. Make sure I'm going to end up with this thing completely firmed in well. You can see all this organic rich soil, but I didn't do this like overnight. This has been done over a 3-year period of time of keeping the ground well mulched and covered. Again, gently tamping. I'm not slamming my foot down here and knocking all the air out of there. I want to make sure it's settled, but not overly compact. I want it to be able to root out easily. And then I need to mulch this whole area. I could mulch it with pine straw. I could mulch it with hardwood mulch. Mulch it with brown mulch, black mulch, whatever natural or material that you've got available to you. And then go back around here. You can see where I've piled dirt up too high and knock that off. It's one of the things I do before I mulched on every landscape job, is go back and make sure these things didn't get buried too deep and correct it before I mulch. We'll water it in extremely well. I want to settle all the soil around it. You may see that you water, that some other little spot around it develops a little sinkhole. It may show you some spot that you haven't tamped it down well enough. So I want to get this extremely well watered. Again, that's surrounding. Here's the thing, when you're watering during abnormally dry times, which we have going on right now, it's important not to just water right at the base of this plant, because this surrounding soil is so dry right now, it's going to try to wick the water away that I give this azalea. So I want to really water. I want to saturate this entire area really well. And the way I'll go about watering it, I think you can go overboard here with water. I'll water it in extremely well because again, I want to settle it in. I want to get the surrounding soil actually moist, which may take me a few times to do it. Once I've done it though, I'll just come over here in a few days. I'm transplanting this thing at the beginning of December. We're not using a lot of water right now. It's cool outside. It's actually cloudy. This water is not going to disappear very quickly. I'll come over here in 2 or 3 days and I'll put my finger down at the base of it about 1 inch deep, 1.5 inches deep, and I'll see, if it's getting dry. And once it needs water again, I'll do what I'm showing you again. I like to drown and forget is my watering strategy. I want to saturate this area completely, and then I want it to actually need water before I water again. Real quick review, if it was a much older plant, I would have likely root pruned it and waited 6 or 8 weeks before I moved it. And that really does help acclimate it to those roots being broken on it and maybe start to reform some roots back in toward the center. So when you move it, it's a little less stress. If a plant's been in the ground for less than 3 years, unless it's something that's really grows super fast, I have a fig here that would be an example of that. It's got roots on top of the ground and like this after 3 years. But most things you can pop out of the ground that first 3 years and pretty much move them around, where you need them to go. And again, conditions are going to change, and feel free to pop something out of the ground. And we're going to be doing popping some things out of the ground, dividing some perennials and some other things in upcoming content. We need mulch here. Okay, I mixed in all that organic material that was on the top, and it's down in there. I've got upcoming, I'm going to be grinding up the leaves that we have laying all over the place right now and using those as mulch in a lot of spaces. So you can use your leaves, you can use, again, hardwood mulch, pine straw, anything, but I need to mulch this space because that's going to help with several things this winter. Number one, it's going to prevent all that water from evaporating out really quickly because the air tends to be a little drier in the winter time. So that's one thing, is regulating moisture. The other thing it'll do is regulate soil temperature. I don't want those roots that I just damaged to then be doubled down on with really super cold nights. So I'm going to put 2 or 3 inches of either leaves, hardwood mulch, pine bark, pine straw, whatever it is, on top to regulate that soil temperature. And it will also help me prevent any weeds from coming in here and competing with them, at the beginning of spring when the weed seed starts to germinate really quickly. So get that ground covered back up as quick as possible after you get it planted. But azaleas, one of the easier things to transplant, and if you find that your Encore Azaleas especially have shade has developed over them, or you think you put them in too much shade initially, pop them out of the ground, move them to a sunnier spot. They won't have any problem with it, and they'll be more rewarding in a sunnier space. So thank you guys very much for watching and following along with the channel.